I have here a 2019 Mercedes Sprinter VS30. It's a 3-liter diesel. I'm going to be cleaning the EGR valve. This is an ex-Amazon van. I don't know that the EGR valve has ever been cleaned. It had 67,000 miles on it when I bought it. It now has 75,000. So if you know modern diesels, they don't like to idle, and Amazon vans do an awful lot of idling. So we're going to open this one up and see how it looks. I do a lot of highway driving now, but with its past, I'd like to see what it looks like, and that's going to give me a pretty good indication of what everything else looks like in the intake manifold and swirl flaps and all that stuff as far as how gunked up it is. So we're going to start pulling this thing apart and see how it looks. First thing I want to do is get this oil fill tube out of my way. And this just lifts off just like a filler cap, because, you know, in other applications that's probably what goes there. But for us, we can just leave this in place so we don't have to plug the hole. Makes it a little easier. I'm going to try to make this a pretty quick, down and dirty video on how to get this thing off, and no fluff. I've got a new gasket for it coming. You can reuse this gasket if it doesn't look bad. But for $12 for an OEM part, and I think $8 for an aftermarket, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense not to just go ahead and replace it. Now, this van runs beautifully. I have no problems idling and no problems with anything. So why disturb the EGR valve, you ask? Well, I've seen what EGR valves can look like on modern diesels after similar mileage with much better running conditions than an Amazon van's going to see. So I'm just really curious to see what we're going to be dealing with inside. I'll be really impressed if it's not terribly coked up. Now, I've never had this off, but we have 4 bolts. And then I don't imagine this was in the service schedule for Amazon to pull these off and clean them, so it's probably never been removed. And if that's the case, we may have to do a bit of cajoling to remove the EGR valve once we get these 4 bolts out. Now I've got a small soft face hammer to get us started, and if that doesn't persuade it, we'll move on to larger items. One way or another, it's coming off. You could remove these with a magnet. They're long enough that once you've loosened them fully, they don't come out. And I've got a camera in the way here, so it's probably a better chance than normally of dropping one. I'm going to go ahead and slide this terminal back and see if we can get it off. We might be able to do this without removing it. Don't slide this plastic clip all the way out, or you'll have to get it back in there. So here we are, we've got this thing loose. Starting with a soft face hammer here, see if we can get some movement. And we've got movement, which is a great sign. Always good when you don't have to resort to harder methods. Imagine you can see it rotating in the video here a bit. We're just going to get it to a point where it'll rotate, and then we will rotate it back a bit more. Alright, well, we are out of there. I would say that looks remarkably good for the mileage. It's got some buildup, but nothing like what I was expecting. That's fantastic. Now we just want to make sure that nothing's going to inhibit the movement of the actuator here. And again, down in the intake, looks surprisingly good. I don't know how well you can see it in the video. See if I can get a better shot maybe with the camera, but pretty good. Pretty good. We're just going to use brushes and put some shop rags down to cover up our gap here and do whatever we can to plug up the hole, and we'll clean it up. Since we're in here, honestly, it doesn't need it. Certainly not badly. Gasket looks great as well, but again, I've got one coming tomorrow, so let's go ahead and pop a new one on. I've got some CRC mass airflow cleaner here. I'm only using this because I've got some lying around I want to get rid of. I'm just going to give it a few shots to get it soaking in and go grab some rags to cover everything up. You could use carburetor cleaner. Pretty much anything you've got lying around for cleaners is going to work. As far as the actual cleaning, I'd say use whatever you've got lying around for brushes, toothbrushes, gun cleaning brushes. Work really well. Kind of it's going to depend how bad your valve looks as to how much work you're going to have to put in there. Well, it didn't take much cleaning. This may have been an exercise in futility, but it's good peace of mind knowing how good this thing looks at 75,000 miles. It's all in really good shape. So we're going to go ahead and reassemble it. I'll be waiting for the new gasket to get here tomorrow before I put it all the way back together and torque it, but I will set the EGR valve back down in the hole for the moment. Say it goes without saying, but clean your gasket mating surfaces real well. Probably hit this real gently with a red Scotch-Brite to get the little bit of residue off here. Carbon buildup on the inside's really not as bad as you'd expect. It's always going to be bad. I'm all for deleting EGR systems on diesels, especially there's nothing good for the engine about an EGR valve. I don't care what you read. But as long as this one's in place and operational, I'm going to leave it alone. The DPF and everything on this car or van works really well, so there's no reason to interrupt it. First sign of trouble, this one's getting deleted. I do have some scarring over here on this side of the mating surface, which might indicate this EGR valve having been removed in the past, which would explain why it's so clean, so that's interesting. I do have a pretty good service history of this at different Mercedes dealerships from before I bought it, but it is not, an EGR valve cleaning is not among them. Alright, I'm back. I've received my new gasket. Ordered on eBay. Got it for $8. And we're going to go ahead and reinstall this. Make sure you've cleaned the gasket mating surfaces on both sides. Get a nice seal. EGR valve looks great. Alright, I did a little bit of tapping to get this thing flush. It was snug going back in. So, new gasket. I tapped on all the surfaces a little bit just to get it seated all the way. I was unable to find a factory torque spec for this in a quick Google search, so I don't know. They were not tight at all coming out. I'm going to go 70 inch-pounds just for the bolt size, if you want to torque them. Otherwise, I'd just say pretty snug. If when you remove your EGR valve or go to remove it, if the hose clamps are in the way, you may have to take some hose clamp tool or channel locks and just rotate those out of the way. There's no need to remove them. You could, of course, take these hoses off and pull the whole EGR valve out to get onto your bench. And if your EGR valve is incredibly coked up and just nasty, it might be a better idea to go ahead and do that. Easier to clean on the bench than it is under here. But if I don't have to disturb the hoses, I certainly don't want to. Remember to lock your locking clip here in the hose, or in the wiring harness. This is also a good time to note that right behind this hose, there's a plug, and that's where you can install a factory oil dipstick, which is not equipped with the 2019 Plus sprinters. I think they're about $30 online. And that's that. Pretty simple job. Really only takes about 15 to 20 minutes depending on how bad your EGR valve is. As far as service interval, I've got 75,000 miles on this van now. As I said earlier in the video, due to that gouge on the mating surface on the underside of this, I imagine someone has been in here and cleaned this EGR valve at some point. So I will probably check mine again in 15,000 miles or so. And if it looks as good as it did this time or better, I would increase that interval to 30,000 or more if my driving habits and conditions haven't changed much. I'm here in Florida and I do probably 95% highway driving now. Obviously it was a stop and go vehicle for the rest of its life and I bought it at 67,000 miles. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed the video. Subscribe to the channel. I've got lots more technical stuff coming up on the Sprinter van and other projects as well, and check out the camper conversion on the inside if you haven't yet. Hope this helps.